Good evening. I'm John Batchelor. This is the John Batchelor Show. Taxes, tax reform. This is not IRS. This is about taxes in America. Personal taxes and especially corporate taxes. Larry Kudlow, my colleague, co-host, and friend, joins. Kudlow reports at CNBC, and Larry had a segment tonight, a colloquy about the tax reform proposals presented by the President of the United States traveling to an Amazon center in Chattanooga, Tennessee, proposing to reduce the corporate tax rate, the present 35%, which I believe is the highest in the solar system. I'll check back on Mars when we finish talking here. But in any event, it's very high. And he's proposing 25%. However, at that point, I get all tangled up in what the president means by reducing taxes, just for manufacturing firms, for example, and what he wants to do with the money to create jobs for the middle class. Larry, a very good evening to you. The president's no longer running for the presidency. He was twice elected. Good for him. However, what I read from the proposal today, the speech the president mentioned, he used the metaphor of grand bargain. Haven't we heard this before? Is not this Groundhog Day, tax reform, Obama administration? Good evening to you, Larry.
Good evening, John. Well, he came up with something like this last year. I don't know if it was quite as fleshed out. I mean, this is a funny thing, because here's where Obama could do some good, and he's actually close to doing good, because if he lowers the tax rate from 35% to 28%, which is the basic nut, the basic central point he's trying to make, all right, that would do some good. Not quite as low as I'd like to see it, but it would do some good, okay? And might get companies to unlock some of the cash they have and start investing and creating jobs. So just on that single basis alone, he could do some good. However, there's always a however with this guy. We don't know the treatment of cash overseas, all right, foreign-sourced income overseas, of which there's at least $1 trillion worth. And there is a suspicion, even though they didn't lay it out in their so-called fact sheet, that those companies are going to be penalized heavily if they bring their money home. But then again, there's a subheading that those that bring money home and invest in some kind of manufacturing institutes or something that he wants as one of his pet little spending projects, maybe they'll get off, maybe they won't. We don't know that. It's not going to be territorial, which is really too bad. So the double tax on foreign income is still there. And you're still left with a gap. If you're a small business owner, you're going to pay 39.6%. That's the personal income tax rate. If, on the other hand, you're a C Corp, you're going to pay 28%. And that's patently unfair, because small businesses can really do, a lot of good in creating jobs. So you have these other problems, and then we don't know what the loophole closers are going to be. And this is very important. I mean, there was some talk in the paper about cash expensing, depreciating equipment, which, in my opinion, should be done in year one. Well, he wants to make this revenue positive, and by doing so, somehow get himself a couple of, who knows, how many hundreds of billions of dollars to invest in, again, some of his pet little peeves on infrastructure.
Community college training. He wants it.
Yeah, well, it's not the worst thing in the world, but it just doesn't work in this context. He's cross-roughing from one side of the planet to the other. It just doesn't work. So I can't figure out whether this is a real tax cut or a tax increase in revenue terms. In marginal rate terms, it will be a tax cut, which could be a good thing, depending on the treatment of these foreign income sources. So, gosh, this could be made very simple. He could have had a very simple and direct message, but they always want to control and direct and tell companies and individuals what to do, and it really is a pity.
There was the always the flavor of punitive in the remarks, Larry. Always punish someone. He wants to punish people for having cash overseas.
Yeah.
He wants to make certain that people pay their fair share. Now, that is not, remember we used to talk about pro-business, anti-business. That is neither. What that is suggests to me is someone who doesn't want a deal. He wants to posture, as if he's continuing to run for the White House. We saw Mr. McConnell answer immediately. That's the important thing. That's the Senate. And we also saw that there wasn't a lot of clapping from corporate America. I don't think put another way, Larry, has American business turned Mr. Obama off? Have they hit the mute button?
Well, we'll hear tomorrow, the next day, what former Governor John Engler and the Business Roundtable say. The BRT, they're friends of mine. I usually moderate their panels. I'm interested to hear what they have to say to see if they can work with this, okay? Because this is just a White House proposal. It obviously would run through the Senate Finance Committee, run by Max Baucus, who was more sympathetic, or the House Ways and Means, run by Dave Camp, who was very sympathetic. But, I mean, you get the sense here, both the speech last week and the speech today, that it's imperative for Obama to raise as much money as he can in order to spend it on his pet projects. He rails on against the budget-cutting sequester and the budget caps, things that I think have done a lot of good. So he has to make up ground, and he wants to have this laundry list of little sort of small ball things that he insists on, which will go to his favorite interest groups. So today, you're going to see it with tax reform loopholes. Last week, it was all about this $1 trillion tax hike announced by Senator Harry Reid, which is supposed to substitute for the sequester. None of this is going to happen. I mean, believe me, none of this will pass the House of Representatives. Nothing.
And the president, in making these proposals, he talks about the middle class, jobs for the middle class. Larry, let's just set the White House, close the door on the White House. There, it's closed. All right, here, between us. You have led me to understand these many years what will boost jobs over the last 5 years of the recession, the Great Recession, is to reduce the corporate taxes.
Right. Just
reduce them. And 25%, you're being very diplomatic, Mr. Kudlow.
Right.
15%, like Canada.
Canada, 28. Obama's at 28. I want to go to 25.
I'll take 15 because that would loose the hiring, and we would be in that virtuous virtuous circle. Everybody would hire, and then they'd buy houses, and then they'd hire, and then they'd buy houses. Is that a theory or is that a fact, Larry? Have we got evidence for that?
Any economist worth his or her salt. By the way, Canada's 15 plus 10, 25. Right. But any economist worth his or her salt will tell you that you really can't have steady, well-paying job creation unless businesses are investing in what's called long-lived assets. You know, factories and warehouses and things that railroad tracks. I mean, stuff that goes on, takes you a bunch of years to build, and then it lasts for a long time. That's what's been lacking in this entire so-called recovery. So the point I'm making is, it might not solve every problem, but if you give these companies more money after tax, if you give them a higher margin, okay, they will make these investments. Right now, they're not convinced of it. And the stock market today didn't even blink. I mean, it had no impact at all when it heard this plan. So that tells me nothing's going to happen.
Larry Kudlow, CNBC's Kudlow Report and Kudlow Radio on the weekend. We're turning to the GDP. The first version of the second quarter GDP is expected within the next hours, and also the Federal Reserve. What will it report after its two-day meeting? I'm John Batchelor. This is the John Batchelor Show.